I got me twisted.
Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about The Dark Tower? Stick around and find out. Don't let Satan it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let Satan it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let Satan it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. All right. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here with my uncut review of The Dark Tower. I couldn't figure out exactly what song to start with. I chose that one because the boy in this story has this ability called the Shine, and a very evil character who in many ways kind of represents, I think, Satan, or ultimate evil, we might say, is trying, in a sense, to blow out his shine. Alright, let me get to my notes here. The synopsis for The Gunslinger at IMDb reads, "The last gunslinger, Roland Deschain," man, I don't remember that last name being said once in the whole movie, "has been locked in an eternal battle with Walter O'Dim." I don't remember that last name either. "Also known as the Man in Black, determined to prevent him from toppling the Dark Tower, which holds the universe together. With the fate of the worlds at stake, good and evil will collide in the ultimate battle, as only Roland can defend the tower from the Man in Black." I kind of wish that was the story. I mean, it is, but a lot of this is about this young boy, this 13-ish aged boy named Jake, who is lives in the real, modern New York City world, and he's been having visions or dreams and stuff of this Dark Tower and this Man in Black and the Gunslinger and people that have fake skin on that they can rip off, and there's something else underneath, and he's seeing psychologists because of this, and no one believes him that these things are real, and he is kind of the chosen one who has the ability to, actually he's the chosen one in a darker sense, where he alone has the power to destroy the Dark Tower if the Man in Black can use him to bring that about, which is what the Man in Black's quest is, and what this boy is trying to avoid being used for, and what the Gunslinger is, in the mix for to protect him from. So anyway, it really, I think, because of this young character, who I think is in the books. I'm not really familiar with the books. I tried reading the books. I tried reading the first book in the Dark Tower series, just called The Gunslinger, and I couldn't get, I think I read maybe one chapter. I was like, I can't get into this prose, because the omniscient voice of the, the narrator was saying "reckon" and stuff like that. It was like hearing, some old cowboy telling the story at a campfire, which I can see why that might be appealing. And actually now, because since I first tried to read those books, I've gain an appetite for Westerns, so watching this movie, I'm like, maybe I should go back and give those a try. At the time, I couldn't get into it, so I really don't have familiarity with the books, but I did do a quick Amazon search to kind of get a little information about the series. There is a character named Jake in the series, but from my first impressions, that's not like... It wasn't a young adult, like the young boy is the main protagonist and stuff. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but either way, this felt like the conversion of a young adult book into a movie, and we've seen many of those. It has a serious, grim tone to it, but it has like a young adult style written hero and story elements, So what do I mean by that? The kids and the young adults are overly empowered in the series. They're the only ones that know what's going on, really going on in the world. And the dumb parents and teachers and the police and stuff, they don't believe these kids and their wild imagination. And then you also have kids that are kind of leading the adults around because they're the chosen one, or they have the inside knowledge of what's really going on in the world. And so the adults find themselves. So the Gunslinger in this movie kind of finds himself being led around by this kid. And let's see, what else? Oh, I'll get to psychological realism in a second, which kind of ties into the young adult stuff. The power limitations of the villain were unclear to me. He's definitely super, super powerful. So it wasn't how powerful he was, it was the limitations or his potential vulnerabilities that were unclear to me. And that resulted in a climax that, I mean, the only thing I'll say is evil was defeated in this movie. I won't say how much it was defeated, or specifically how or whatever, but you kind of expect that, I think, with a movie like this, to some degree at least, evil's going to be defeated. But the climax, because the villain's limitations were unclear to me, felt like a surprisingly easy win. It's just at one point I was like, they did it, I didn't think they would be able to do that. I didn't think he'd be vulnerable to that or whatever. So it was kind of an unsatisfying ending for me. Let me talk about the lack of psychological realism. I guess that's what I would call it in movies where people are making choices that I'm like, I know I can't be the only one that's thinking, why would you do that, you know? And one example that doesn't give really anything away happens near the very beginning of the movie. Jake is seeing visions of people who wear fake skin to cover up what kind of creature they really are, and they have these seams that run, kind of behind their ear and down their neck and stuff. He's told his psychologist about this, and then he's, like a scene later, about to be taken away by this group that's a psychological kind of hospital or something that's going to help him out, and then he sees that one of the workers has one of those seams there, and he's telling his parents when they get into a room alone together, before he leaves, he's like, you can't make me go with them, they're the bad people, and da-da-da-da-da, and please, you have to believe me, and they're like, da-da-da, they're like, come on, kid, son, you can't do this, they do this is, they're good for you, they're going to help you and stuff, and he didn't once say, look at the seam behind their ear. Why would he not say that? Because he'd already told his psychologist. He's like, look, I've seen this. I've been seeing this in my visions, okay? So this is not an accident. I've already talked about this before they showed up. Then they show up. A dude has a big old seam running down both sides of his face, of his head. Come on, And then later on, when he kind of discovers... Oh, I don't know if I want to say very much about the thing that he discovers. It's, I don't know. You've seen it. If you've seen the trailers, you know that they're hopping through portals. So he discovers a portal, and right before that, he made a call to his mom just to let her know he was okay and that he loves her. So the kid's got a cell phone on him, and now suddenly he has physical proof right in front of him that all this crap he's been dreaming about and saying, it is legit, it is real, okay? Not only that, but his parents saw some pretty crazy stuff just before that, So I'm thinking, this is when you call the cops. You call 911, you tell them whatever you want to get them on site, and then you show them the weird sci-fi tech that's in this building, okay? And then ask for help. Ask for help. Get people involved that can actually help with this, And if you're watching the movie, you might say, oh, but what really would the adults do? Because, the man in black is so powerful and stuff, and just with a word, he can command people to do things. Well, at some point, he could just say, you're going to need earplugs, everybody. Earplugs and lots of guns. So, I don't know. Even if that plan wouldn't have worked, it still seems strange to me that at this point, when no one's been believing him, they've been calling him, a kid with psychological problems, suddenly all this tangible proof is like right around him, and he doesn't take advantage of that, and instead is just kind of going off on his own. That bothers me. I have trouble connecting with the protagonist at that point when he, on more than one occasion, does things like that. So I did like the cool conceptual mashup that this movie represents. You've got like this gunslinger / knight kind of vibe going on versus magic in a sci-fi world-hopping setting. So they're, mashing together these different types of genre settings, and I'm always game for that. I think that's really fun. Let's see. Let's talk about the cast just briefly. The cast is all solid, including Tom Taylor as Jake Chambers. He's got a heavy scene that's really well done. Let me just give him credit for that. That he really handles this really heavy scene really well. And I actually don't have anything really negative to say about his acting, but that did remind me of something I should have mentioned when I was talking about psychological realism. There is an event that happens to Jake in this movie that should have shattered him for the rest of the movie. Should have shattered him for the rest of the movie. And if you see this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the fact that he can have one heavy scene dealing with that and then kind of just suck it up for the rest of the movie doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. I think if you go into a movie like this and say, okay, I just got to get in young adult mode, and if you like those kinds of books or those kinds of movies, and you can kind of connect with that, and those issues that I've mentioned are not going to be a problem for you, then you probably won't have a problem with this. But I don't care for young adult style stories for those reasons, and so I was struggling. Let's see. Let me talk about the stunts and visuals a little bit. Cool monsters in this. It's got a PG-13 rating, but these are the kinds of visual designs of monsters I would more expect to see in a rated R movie. They were genuinely like scary and freaking intimidating to me. I was like leaning back in my chair like, oh crap, that's messed up, you know. Really freaky and just scary looking. And part of it is because they hid the monster a lot of times. They would have them appearing in slightly darker times of day and stuff, you know. It was still, I would say, the CG is standard quality, and at times it looked obvious to me, although I am cursed with eyes that can tend to pick out CG a bit. But there was one time where like the gunslinger is struggling against a tentacle, and I was just like, dude, you're doing this, you're jiggling your hand and tensing up, and they're animating around that, you know, and it just looked like it was a kind of a cartoon tentacle that he was struggling with. It was it took me out. It took me out of the movie in that moment. But the overall cold and grim visual design was really a great treat for me. I do tend to enjoy those kinds of settings and those types of visuals. Okay, so whenever I watch a movie or play a game or something like that, I try to ask myself, is there anything of worthwhile spiritual or moral or philosophical significance going on in this thing that might stimulate worthwhile thought or maybe opportunities for conversation? Maybe. When this one, even though it's like a urban fantasy type thing, it still has its roots, I think, in horror in many ways. And when you get into horror, and whether that's physical alien type horror, or especially when you get into supernatural horror, a lot of times good and evil really tend to come to the surface, because like they'll have a clearly evil character, and then they'll have him get his just desserts by the monster or the alien or the ghost or whatever that's taking people out, and so you have that sense of satisfaction as an audience member, like, yeah, that was scary, but man, he had that coming, So that these types of movies are where good and evil tend to stand out a little bit more, I think. And this is certainly being, set up as this kind of iconic battle between a character that represents evil big time, and then kind of a representation of ultimate good too. But let me talk about the representation of evil. The Man in Black, I think, though maybe not intended for this, is a good illustration for Satan and for the struggle that believers have with evil. We as believers in Christ still are struggling with evil that persists in ourselves, evil that affects us from the world around us. The Man in Black brings tangible evil by killing people and bringing about conflict and suffering. He also brings intangible evil by reminding people of their mistakes frequently and causing them to despair and think about certain things that would cause them to despair. And so I felt like he was a really good representation of the nature of evil and our experience of evil as believers in our lives. Good is less obviously present to me in this movie, and it seems to only exist at best in the protagonists, and only in their good moments. There's not this purity of good represented by one or more characters in the movie that, consistently represented by them in the way that evil is consistently represented by the Man in Black. There is no ultimate good character in this movie as a counterbalance to the Man in Black. The two closest things, I think, would be, one, the Dark Tower, which protects the universe from evil as long as it's still standing. It's like this is like the thing that, the synopsis says holds the universe together, but the way to describe it is it protects the universe from evil. If the Dark Tower falls, then evil just like enters into the whole universe, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. But the question I wanted to ask myself is, okay, well, it's a tower. Who built this thing? Why not give them a phone call and say, hey, thanks for that tower you built. That's really been working great for us. We got a situation here. I'm wondering if you could maybe come and build something else, or reinforce the towers. Who built the tower? Give him a call. And then the second thing that maybe would represent ultimate good, or the closest thing to it, would be fathers/family. This is a bit of a reach. The Gunslinger Creed, which gunslingers, I guess, speak. It's kind of like the Green Lantern Oath. It most highly values remembering the face of your father. When two, as one example in the movie, when two morally promiscuous women kind of proposition the gunslinger, he says, you've both forgotten the faces of your fathers. If you stretch it there, then, maybe there could be like a Heavenly Father metaphor in there, but I don't think that's what's intended at all. Although Stephen King I think maybe comes from a Catholic background. I'm not sure. So I don't want to make any guesses there. As it stands, it's unclear why we should remember the face of our fathers. It's clearly a value in this movie, but why we should, what about that, is important or whatever, it's really left unsaid. So a clearer representative for ultimate good in this movie, I think, would have been nice, but its absence isn't surprising to me. Popular spirituality, the way that people popularly tend to think about spiritual matters, emphasizes the good within and not external to the individual. And that results in a subtle, we are all part of God mentality. Now, in the short term, that may be comforting to us when we don't want to have to answer to anyone but ourselves, But in the long term, that view provides no reasonable hope that evil can and will be dealt with completely and justly. Since broken, dysfunctional beings like all of us would have to be responsible for that, without a perfect external good outside of us to ultimately deal with evil justly and completely. All right, so those are my thoughts. If I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were to go back in time with a time machine, how do I usually say that? But if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip it. It's got too much young adult stuff for you, so you're not really going to connect with it. Instead, maybe give the books another try. I think that at least the first one isn't primarily about Jake, so give it a shot, or maybe some other Stephen King books that you never got around to reading when you were younger because it was kind of like a taboo to read Stephen King. If you're a kid in a particular type of Christian home. But yeah, it makes me kind of curious because I know this series of books kind of alludes to and kind of brings together the continuities of multiple, if not all, of Stephen King's horror books, and I even was able to pick out, that's a reference to Pennywise, like the clown from It, and is that a reference to that one that took place at the airport or something, so it makes me kind of curious and like, I should maybe give some of his like supernatural horror books a try, so anyway. That's maybe what I would say to myself. It's rated PG-13 for thematic material, including sequences of gun violence and action. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Please do like, share, and subscribe. If any of those tickle your fancy, that'd be a help to me. And also, please consider supporting this channel by becoming a Spirit Blade Insider, which grants you exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes content. For more info, you can visit our About page at spiritblade.com, where you'll also find like our audio dramas and our weekly podcast. Finally, there is a ton of content and community over at christiangeekcentral.com. I hope you'll join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. There we go.
I'm not interested.